Right now, very pleased in our studio to have LSU's Executive Deputy AD and COO, Stephanie Rempe, because you have all the answers for us today, don't you? You're going to tell us when they're going to kick off and where they're going to play and all the games, everything, right?
Play, yep.
You got
How many
all,
people can come?
You got all the answers. There's no doubt. That's why you're here today. Thank you for coming in, by the way. Very, very appreciative. How would you describe, like, in your career, I would imagine there's nothing that even rivals this, right? Like, there can't be even any close comp, is there?
No, absolutely not.
I mean, what would you say is the largest hurdle maybe you've had to overcome in an athletic department professionally to this point?
Well, there was probably two, 9/11.
Sure.
And then the 2008 challenges with the recession. So financially, it was very difficult.
So if you would elaborate a little there, because I think one of the things that I find so interesting, I'm fascinated by the business of sports. And before you came in, I was talking about this, about how a lot of people think it's just, meatheads that just want their football. And I'm like, yeah, but when you see how the dominoes fall economically, and not just on college campuses, but when you're talking about pro leagues and how it affects TV and every advertisers, radio guys, like everybody, it touches everything. So like when the 2008 recession's going on, how did that impact what you were at Washington at the time?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a couple things. One, in the fall of 2008, the football team there went 0-12. So that
Ty Willingham, I remember.
That was the first challenge, and then the economy started going down. We were also in the middle of trying to figure out a way to renovate Husky Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those things aligned not well. And so we had to cut, I think at the time we laid off 11 people. We dropped our men's and women's swimming program. We had to cut our budget significantly. But we, locked arms and tried to stay together. And we obviously had a coaching change, and then tried to ride that. And what was really interesting at the time, because the economy was having its challenges, we were able to create some systems through the legislature to be able to take advantage of the economy with the Husky Stadium, and ended up being able to create this, it's called a developer model. And so we were able to attack Husky Stadium at a time when lots of things weren't being built, but we had some structures around it that was able to have some success and build Husky Stadium at a decent, it was $285 million, and it was
it's just $285.
yeah.
Right?
But compared to A&M, that was
Right.
like $500 million or $500 million.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about a $250 million and like you shrug because A&M did it $500 million, probably just like wrote a check for that, right? I mean, I'm sure they paid for that all cash with the money they got in Aggie Lane. But like, how would you describe what the mood is like? Are there people in the LSU athletic building right now, or is everybody working remotely?
Most people are working remotely.
So,
absolutely.
How would you describe generally, and this may be tough to answer because you're not actually seeing people aside from Zoom calls, but like, how would you describe the general mood around LSU athletics right now?
I would say it's fluctuated over the last 4 months. First, it was just kind of in awe, and we just couldn't believe this was happening. But you had optimism that it was going to, move through, and we would be back in a month or two or whatever. And then the reality started to set in, and all of the focus was on when we could bring our student athletes back. Mm-hmm. So that took all of our time, all of our energy. How are we going to bring them back? When are we going to bring them back? Who we're going to bring back? When we bring them back, what are we going to do to make sure they're healthy and safe? And then as soon as that happened, which was the first weekend, I think it was June 8th, that we decided we could have them back through the SEC. So then the focus is on those kids that are here and what's happening, and when we're testing them and how we're keeping them safe and how we're educating them, how we're cleaning everything. And then we brought in volleyball and soccer, and then we started to work towards the basketballs, and we started to get real excited. Things were looking good, and we were real optimistic and starting to really put the turn on the gas to get ready for the football season. And then the last 2 weeks have been obviously very hard for a lot of people, just nationally watching the trends and then seeing what happened with the Big Ten and then the Pac-12 and then the Ivy Leagues and all of those things. So that's been a little bit difficult. And I think I mentioned to you before we started, we have so many scenarios,
right?
So many contingencies, and they're all just sitting there. You're
like, just pick one. Like, what do you do? Yeah. It's like, what do you do there? But what was your reaction when you saw the Big Ten and the Pac-12 news last week? Did it catch you completely off guard?
Yes, I would say. I mean, we started to get wind of it that week, that there was some assessment of playing conference only, but I don't think we thought it was going to come out quite like that and quite that quickly, for sure. And then I think we had an idea that the Pac-12 might follow. But yeah, it was not something that we thought we anticipated, any earlier than maybe a day or two.
You mentioned you have all the the contingencies. And really one of the things that I want to dive deep with you is like how you plan for all those contingencies, right? Because I think that's something that many fans who show up on Saturdays maybe don't know how you got to that conclusion. I'll give you an example. In 2015, LSU played a game against South Carolina. I don't know if you know the story, but it was supposed to be in Columbia. There was flooding in Columbia. And in less than a week, they moved the game to Baton Rouge. And I remember talking to facilities operators like, man, you don't understand like how far in advance we have to order toilet paper for the bathrooms. Like, you can't just do it in a week. Like, it's so hard to plan for those things. So whenever you all get together and you start thinking, all right, we got to put together these contingencies, what's the starting block? Like, how do you even begin?
Well, it probably depends on what area, right?
Okay.
So
pick one.
I'll do our events and operations.
Okay.
So there's an individual named Dan Gaston who actually was with Scott and I at Washington, the University of Washington. So we hired him this summer. He started about the same time I did, and so he came. So he's been in here for a year now. It's been a year. So at the time it wasn't. And he just has this innate ability to plan for a variety of scenarios, and he knew immediately that there were a lot of things we needed to tackle. So pretty quickly he was on top of figuring out what kind of cleaning supplies we needed, what kind of equipment, right? Because if you're going to clean a weight room that is huge, and you have to clean it every time 15 guys go through it, being able to wipe down every weight is not reasonable, right? You also have a staff and all of those types of things. So you're going to need supplies. Well, those supplies, as we have found over time, get pretty backlogged. But because Dan was pretty on top of it, he started doing some of those things well in advance, which was great because that's who Dan is. When it came to Tiger Stadium, okay, well, we have to have hand sanitizer. So pretty quickly he was ordering hand sanitizer in the machines or whatever that are
Right, like the auto dispenser, the
1,200 of those for Tiger Stadium.
Like, how do you even, that's my point. Like, how do you even, at a time where it's so hard to get those supplies, how do you fill 1,200 hand sanitizing stations for presumably 7 home games?
And at the same time, he's also trying to figure out how to do our bathrooms with towels,
Right, yeah, auto dispensers, right. We had to install those down the hall as well.
Yep,
they put one on the wall right next to the toilet, so if you actually have to sit, you're probably going to hit your head on the towel thing.
Right.
That was not good planning. There's another wall. They should put it on the other wall. On the other wall.
Right. Then just go to the stadium, right? So how do you get people in and through the stadium? And then the list goes on. And the neat part about our industry is the number of people who are trying to help, trying to be proactive, setting webinars, people sharing information. There are countless vendors out there that are interested in helping, and there are countless groups like Populous Architects that they're a big player in the architecture world. So they've been having webinars where they start talking about, okay, how do you park people? How do you enter people? How do you figure out how to navigate this whole thing? And there are a bunch of experts that are now working on those types of scenarios, and then they would help with our staff, and we'd get a lot of our peers on the calls and talk through all kinds of different things.
So if in a hypothetical, let's say there are games, but because you said there's every contingency, let's say there's games, no fans, do you just take all of that and go like, do you just throw it away? Is that essentially?
Yeah, I don't think anybody in our department is prepared to get their arms around no fans. Like that would be devastating.
Yeah.
Right? We have 100,000 people. It's not like I'm speaking the gospel. We don't know what is going to happen. But the idea that no fans would be there, I think, is a little bit hard for all of us to get our arms around.
Do you what was your? I want to come back to the. Obviously, we're going to talk about fans and what that means because and there's some interesting things that, like Clemson, for example. I don't know if you saw, they sent out a survey to their fans. I'm curious your thoughts on that. We'll get to that in a second, though. But what did you have a general takeaway from the AD's meeting yesterday? It seemed like. We obviously don't know it was a long meeting, obviously, and we got like a 2-paragraph thing that was like, we'll decide at the end of July. But what was your takeaway?
I think what I would say from that meeting, and obviously Scott is the only one that was there,
right?
1480s and the commissioner. So what I gathered from that, Greg Sankey has been a tremendous leader throughout this entire process for everybody. Is let's take a deep breath. Every day we gain more information. Let's take our time. Let's do this right. Let's not react and not do anything in terms of publicity. Let's do what's best for our student athletes and for our fans and for our communities and all of that. And so I think that's important that everybody see that nobody's panicking from the top in terms of the athletic directors and the commissioner. And that also set as the presidents as well. And then in addition, they have lots of things that they need to talk through. Lots of them are things about visiting team tickets, decisions about volleyball and soccer and some of those sports that had games that started in August. Financial implications, and what does that mean? What do we do with TV? All of the TV contingencies, depending on when we play and who we play and how many games and all of that. So there's a whole variety of things to talk through. A lot of it is just discussing and talking through options and beginning more educated on what things look like as you look forward and what are the financial projections if we don't have all of our games, if we don't have men's basketball. That's obviously the revenue is football, men's basketball when it comes to television. And so I think there's a lot of time it seems like every day we get more pieces of information as we start to put pieces of the puzzle together when we do know one or two pieces when there's, obviously dozens more to figure out.
We were talking off air about how Clemson put out a survey to its fans, and they basically asked, would you rather a fall season with no fans or a spring season with fans? How important are tailgating and game day traditions to you? And trying, I guess, to get the finger on the pulse of their fan base. Do you see merit in something like that? Because to this point, LSU has not had a questionnaire like that to its season ticket holders, correct?
Yeah. I think the challenging part is there's so many unknowns that then you start to you worry about information that gets out there that might not be accurate, or people getting behind one concept or another that you end up not being able to deliver on. I think looking through those questions, I'm not sure how we would even handle the type of responses that we would get. It's nice to have a touch point with your fans, right? You want to communicate with them. You want to tell them what's going on. We want to. And we've had some communication, but not a lot because we don't have the information to tell them what we are able to do. And then when you have the questions like, would you rather play in the spring and have fans or play in the fall? It probably for each person depends on what's important to them. If going to Tiger Stadium every Saturday or for 7 Saturdays in the fall is the primary, the most important thing to them, then they're going to pick the spring. If it's just that we just want to watch football, so if we can't be there but we can watch it on TV, we'll take that as opposed to waiting another 8 months with no sports. So you understand why people have different perspectives. From an athletics department perspective, I mean, we have to keep our doors open.
Yeah.
And when you have significant amount of your revenue as a department that supports not only football, but the other 20 sports and scholarships for our student athletes and everything else, the thought of not being able to have fans, even if we're playing 7 or 12 games, but 7 home games, is daunting.
So the media rights deal that the SEC has and the subsequent payout that everybody, I always like to say, people, you go to every June, you go out to Sandestin and get the big giant cardboard check, right? Like that's not enough. Plus whatever other ancillary revenue LSU could generate outside of football ticket sales, that's not enough to fund the athletic department.
Not even close. Yeah.
So what is the gap?
So our budget is about $145 million.
Right.
And we get when we looked at no fans, which means obviously tickets, donations to premium areas, and then you look at some of the other revenue like concessions and
parking,
and single, all of those things. You're close to $80 million.
Okay, so
and that's for the 7 home games.
So 145 less 80. What you're saying is maybe not as many plane trips. Maybe be like the Cleveland Indians on Major League when you just get that old prop plane or the old Indians bus that you're taking to games everywhere. No, but even obviously I'm joking. Like that wouldn't make up the gap. So what's interesting though, Stephanie, is like from a fan's perspective, what I hear a lot is, man, I'd rather a fall season with no fans than a spring season with fans. And one of the reasons is because, and this is where you get into the difference of, operating functionally a business and then looking at just the sport of sport. What about all the underclassmen that would go early to the draft? You have some of the best players in college football that would choose not to play. A guy like Jamar Chase at LSU or Trevor Lawrence at Clemson would likely not play a spring season. So does that even factor in? It does.
Yeah, of course. And the other part is the community. So, you think about if you didn't have fans, how much money comes into this community because of the fans that come to Tiger Stadium 7 Saturdays a year. How many people stay in hotels, how many people eat at restaurants, all of those types of things. And you take that out of the community, that would be significantly impactful to this entire community. It goes on and on, the implications. But of course, with the student athletes, and we want them to all have a great experience. We want to keep them safe. We want to make sure that they feel safe. We want to keep our coaches safe, all of those types of things. So you have to follow what is best when it comes to the health and safety of them.
one of the things, obviously, we talked about is that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have gone to conference only. What's the benefit of a conference only schedule?
I think we've all been trying to figure that out. I even
Thank
asked.
God you said that.
Yeah.
I mean, I will share with you my view, and we talked about this. I don't know if you saw it today. USA Today published a piece where they went and examined the contracts for 139 non-conference games, and it equates to about roughly $122 million in contracts. And what you just said, like there's a giant gap in a lot of people's budgets if there's going to be some or no fans. And it makes sense if you have an opportunity to lessen your financial burden by $3 to $5 million. That's obviously significant. So that has to be part of it. Maybe that's just me being a cynic, but I think that is a logical part of this conversation.
Which way? Like because they don't have to pay the guarantees?
Right. And there's some that contractually don't. Like they looked at a contract with Florida and New Mexico State, where if the SEC determines that this game should not be played by their determination, free and clear. Now there's obviously a lot of legal battles that would ensue, no question, right? And some contracts that they delved into, there would be like a negotiated buyout, but it would still be a lesser burden than paying a full. I mean, that has to factor into the conversation.
But when you look at the SEC or the Big Ten, the amount of revenue that you generate from a home game far exceeds the guarantee that you would have to pay the school.
No doubt. That's why you play the game.
Right.
I mean, you're netting what what is LSU, $3 to $5 million for a home game? Somewhere in that neighborhood?
No, higher than that.
Higher than that for a home game, so it's gone up.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Texas and Alabama are 10 or 12 million.
Home games.
Yeah.
The net is 10 or 12 million for a game like that. That's incredible. So, it would far outseed. So that then is why, of course, you said like you would rather look at a scenario with fans. Why LSU couldn't wrap, I think the word you said is LSU couldn't wrap their arms around the idea of no fans. So how do we get there?
Yeah. I think it depends on how, first of all, how many people you bring into the stadium. The stadium holds 100,000.
Right.
So if social distancing, the most important thing, and this is when you start talking about if we're going to have to start communicating with our fans, some of those things are what we're going to have to figure out. So we have, 70,000, close to 70,000 season ticket holders. So how many, and that's, some people have 2 tickets, some people have 10, whatever
Good
that
luck.
is. Right. And if you've had 50-yard line seats the whole time, how do you decide which games you get to go to if there's less, if you don't get tickets to every game? We've talked about if it's 50%, if the stadium is 50%, then we do believe every season ticket holder could at least get 2 tickets. But then you also have fans that don't want to come because they don't feel safe. They have elderly family at home, or they have compromised immune systems, or whatever those types of things are. And then you also have how you get people into the stadium and out of the stadium and through the restrooms and concession lines and all those types of things. It's really hard. You can require people to wear masks, but it's also over 100 degrees.
Yeah.
And all of the challenges that come with things like that.
So wearing masks theoretically would be a requirement for, it's a statewide mandate right now, so it would have to be unless if that changed.
Yeah. The hardest part on that, though, is just imagining policing that.
It's impossible. You can't do it. Like you would just hope that if people would abide by it, they would. And then people also mention like the potential of temperature scans. Well, if it's 100 degrees outside, people have been tailgating. You're probably going to have a little bit of an elevated temperature.
Yeah.
Is there a percent capacity where you all figure financially this is the benchmark where we could make it work, right? Or does it have to be a capacity crowd for 7 home games?
I think what's super important, even in that statement, it's not about could we make it work or will we not make it work? That's not. We have to make it work. No matter what happens, we have to make it work, right? We're LSU athletics. We have 21 sports to take care of. We have 500 student athletes to make sure that they're getting an education and all those types of things. So how do we make that work? We've got to figure out all the different options for how to make it work. And we would never want to base our decisions on the finances, right? You have to keep those in mind, and you have to plan for every scenario, but it really is about the health and safety of our student athletes, our coaches, our fans, all of that. That has to be the leading indicator of what kind of decisions we make.
It's interesting, like just as sort of an addendum to that, the part of the conversation is you try to decide what's best for the student athletes, which obviously is first and foremost, and I totally understand that. As educators, as administrators, that's you're taking care of people's children.
Right.
The other part of it is where you say we have to make it work. What you're seeing around the country is a lot of people are cutting sports. I don't think LSU is near there yet. I don't know. But if the alternative is you have to say so long to these sports, like, is that it? Like, how do you balance that? What's a better option? is the better option trying to find a way to play to continue to fund the athletics department so you could fund 21 sports, or do you lose sports?
Yeah, all of those things.
Right? I mean, this is, I think this, like, just you and I having this 20-minute conversation is weaving a web, I think, for a lot of people who probably understand how difficult all of the decisions you all are trying to wade through are.
Yes. I don't have any answers for you, right? I mean, we do all of those things, or everything that we're talking about is things we've discussed.
You've been here for a year-ish.
Exactly. Almost.
Right at a year. What's your favorite cultural Louisiana thing so far?
That's a hard one to answer.
Because there's so many.
Because there are so many. I will say that this isn't me. I don't know if this fits your question exactly, but it's the people. I mean, that's been my absolute favorite part. Somebody just was in town and asked our kids where they liked living the most, and they said Louisiana. They just have more friends, and the people are so welcoming, and they run over to our neighbor's house all the time. They get invited. Riley had a sleepover tonight. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Nah, it's real. It's real life. People, I think it's humanizing. People realize you're not just a voice coming over the air. You're a mom and a wife and working and trying to figure life through all of this stuff right now amid COVID and all. But it is true. Like, why do you think so many people stay? And when people leave, they come back. Look at Scott. There's a reason that he's right. I mean, he's been all over, and there's a reason that he came back. There's a pull about this place, which is very, very, very sincere. So I promise I'm gonna check on my bullet points and I'm gonna let you go. How quickly can you all adapt in the fall if things change? What I mean is, for the benefit of our audience, let's say we move into phase 4. You start the season on time and you move into phase 4 in November. Like, could you all very quickly then adapt and go full stadium or full on everything?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is part of that is the culture of athletics. Like, we have to adapt for a variety of reasons. It can be the weather if you're an outdoor sport. It can be a head coach that wants something very different than they wanted the day before, or even said they were going to want tomorrow. Our staff, and this is true of, I think, athletics in general, people are very responsive and figure out a way to get to yes. Because that's how you have success in athletics program. Coaches don't take no, right? They need to win games. And so we need to be doing everything we can to get them to a yes, whether it's a facility issue or whatever. And so it'd be no different for our fans. And our fans, we want our fans there. So we figure out a way to make sure fans are having a good experience and they have proper customer service and all of those types of things. So if somebody said, yeah, you can bring more, we'd figure it out, of course.
Absolutely. If there are limited fans or limited capacity, is tailgating possible?
So I think the tailgating thing is really hard. Like, Matt, I would ask you, would you ever stand in front of somebody who's been tailgating in a certain spot for 25 years that's an LSU fan and try to tell them they can't?
Well, Stephanie, you're going to say that, and there's going to be people listening going, but they took my spot away. Because at times, LSU, like, as the campus has evolved, there have been spots that have become no tailgating spots. And so that has been, I mean, you get it. It's a big deal around here. That's been a point of contention. But I think my thing, Stephanie, and I think you're alluding to this, is how do you tell 20, 50, 100,000 people, like, are you going to commit every resource in Baton Rouge to making sure someone's not drinking beer next to a tree? I mean, like, realistically, how is that a proper allocation of resources?
So we have talked about making sure that we communicate very effectively on the best practices for tailgating, right? And whatever those are, social distancing, wear masks, don't share cups, use throwaway utensil, whatever they are.
No beer pong.
So that is something that we will absolutely do. We've obviously evaluated restrooms and how to handle restrooms and where we put hand washing stations throughout the tailgating spots and all of that. So I don't think we're prepared to tell people they can't tailgate, but we want to make sure they do it in the safest way possible and to make sure we're educating people on what we think that is. Is
a spring football season feasible with everything else that already happens in the spring?
Right. And I go back to what I said before.
Find a yes.
Yeah, you figure it out. It will be challenging. I mean, goodness, ask our baseball staff or our softball staff or gymnastics,
okay,
whatever it is.
Let me ask the question a different way. What are the biggest challenges of a spring football season potentially?
Well, I think one of the leading indicators of how we will manage that is television, right? Because television is such a significant amount of our revenue. And when the TV station, TV networks have their times and their days that they can put on games, then that's what you work around that. And obviously if it's Saturdays in the spring and we have a baseball game, a basketball game, a gymnastics meet or whatever, things are going to move. But we have that in a much smaller scale with football in the fall, with some of the sports, or when we have multiple sports playing in the winter. You have to work around that with parking issues and staffing and all of those types of things. But we would figure it out. We will. We just will.
What is a realistic? And I know the commissioner said end of July, make a decision. What is a realistic timeline that if I'm a fan, I'm thinking, when might I actually get an answer?
That's a great question.
What should fans be thinking or looking for?
Yeah, that's really going to be hard, right? So let's say July 30th, the commissioner says, okay, we can play football on September 5th. Okay, now then you go back to your states, and they're going to figure out the testing and all of those types of things for the athletes and the coaches and all of that. But then it's going to go back to your state to figure out how many fans. And if our state says, everybody who wants to come can come, then we start to figure out what's the safest way to do that. If the governor says, okay, you can only do 50%, which I think is what Texas is, then we need then just the time frame from when that is decided to how we communicate with our fans. We want to be able to turn that around quickly. But let's say it is 50% fans. Okay, so then how do we figure out which 50,000 people get tickets, right? And so if you want to be able to give every season ticket holder 2 tickets to every game, which would be great, right? Because then you don't have to pick. Because if it's less than that, then you're having somebody who has season tickets and now they can't go to all 7 games. They get to go to 3.5 games or whatever it is. Figuring out those types of things and how we communicate with our fans is what's going to be really challenging. There are a couple different scenarios for you take our stadium, and we have our 70,000 season ticket holders. We have 13,000 student tickets. Mm-hmm. We also have individual game tickets, visiting team tickets, all of those types of things. Some of those maybe we stop selling single game tickets, so you can't come unless you're a season ticket holder, and maybe we limit visiting team tickets, which is something that was voted on.
I was just about to say, what do you do about visiting tickets?
Right. And so anyway, so you start to go down from 100% on the low-hanging fruit before you touch your season ticket holders, because those are the ones we want to take care of, obviously.
I know we talked about like a conference only. We talked earlier about conference only, but is that I'm trying to think how to word this. Is that it's obviously a more appealing option than no football, but is that an option that LSU is willing to say we'll endorse this if we have to go? Like, I guess sorry, I'm fumbling for the way to ask this. I'm thinking of this as like you have this autonomous group of athletic directors in the room, and everyone's going to like vote, right? The AD is voting, representing their entire school. Like, will LSU say, yes, we'll do conference only?
So I think it has to do with so many different factors, right? I'm not going to be able to give you a straight answer, right? The neat part, and I think Scott even said this after yesterday's meeting, is the athletic directors and the commissioner are aligned. They are a collegial group. They talk through everything. Everybody gets to share their opinions, and they come out as one unified group, no question. So that is, I think you start, and I would say that the conference office ensures that they are incredibly thorough with everything they're doing. Every scenario they evaluate down to the nth degree. They're making sure they're talking to our media partners, they're talking to our multimedia rights holders, they're talking to, concessionaires or whatever the issues are that you have to deal with, to make sure we have everything you need to make a really good decision.
Who ultimately makes the decision?
Well, you know what? That's a great point. It's the presidents.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So, for instance,
they collectively vote, and it's just a majority vote?
Depends on the issue. If it has to be majority or it has to be a super majority or whatever those are all in the bylaws and all of that.
Do you want to be like the president of college football? Like, you just run the whole thing?
Yeah, sure.
I think college football needs that right now. And I'll vote for you.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. So it depends on the issue.
Yeah, so I think you asked, would we vote for a conference only if that is what's in the best interest of LSU and the conference? Number one, most important to Scott and to the president is LSU, of course. But we also have to factor in what's best for the conference and all of that. So I have no doubt that if it conference only becomes the path that we need to go down, that we would be supportive if that's what it is. But what that is, and other people talked about longer time in between games, that could be valuable in case there's positive tests or whatever. So then you have 2 weeks before your next game.
Instead
that's
of
a reason, yeah.
I'm sorry, but they said like if you played an 8-game conference, you'd cluster them together in 8. Like you'd push it back and just play 8 weeks straight up until December, the SEC championship game.
You spread it over 14 weeks and you have more time in between games to recover from any time there's an outbreak or something.
Yeah.
Again, it's so complicated.
I know. I'm going to let you go before I ask you 10 more million questions, before I think of 15 more that I want to ask. But do you have your championship ring?
Not yet.
You haven't gotten it?
No.
Or you just didn't bring it?
No, we did.
Were you afraid I was going to steal it?
No, first and foremost was
stolen
getting the student athletes their rings. And
Cool.
So that ring order was placed right away.
Do you have any other like championship rings? I'm thinking back. No football national championship rings. This would be a first for you, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I've been to 3 national championship games at Oklahoma, but we lost both. Once to LSU in 2003.
03 and then 08 with Florida.
No, 04 with USC.
Oh, USC. Oh, back to I'm sorry, I won't mention that one. Worst part of that game, aside from the game, was Ashley Simpson was the halftime guest, and she was it was a very majority Oklahoma crowd, as I'm sure you remember, in the Orange Bowl that day, and they heinously and savagely booed Ashley Simpson. Oklahoma was losing by like 30 at half, and then that came out. It was like, boo! I think that was a drop on this show for many, many years. Stephanie Rempe, Executive Deputy AD and COO out at LSU Athletics. I cannot thank you enough for your time. I took 13 more minutes than I said I was going to, but I'm very, very grateful. I know our audience is too, so thank you.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens.
So you're coming back tomorrow?
Sure.
Okay, Stephanie Rempe will be back.
With all the answers tomorrow.
She'll be back tomorrow with all the answers, when they're going to kick off, who they're going to play, all that good stuff. But thank you sincerely for your time. I appreciate it. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.